Scummate hanno visto.
Runner. Now this story must be one of, if not the most famous cases of Wendigo psychosis ever reported. Plains Cree trapper Swift Runner was a First Nations man from Alberta, and in the winter of 1878, Swift's family was starving. His oldest son ended up dying shortly after from starvation, and shortly after that, out of nowhere, Swift killed and ate his wife and 5 children. Now Swift was not a cannibal. He only lived 25 miles away from Hudson's Bay emergency food supplies, so if he was truly that hungry, he would have just done the trek and gotten food. It was later revealed that he was suffering from Wendigo psychosis, and he was executed after his confession, in which he said he was possessed by a Wendigo spirit during his killing spree. Imagine being so scared of becoming this cannibalistic monster that your paranoia and fear are the very things that turn you into it. Coming in at number 9 are the frogs. This one was shared by Reddit user Unathana, who said growing up he spent his summers with his grandma out in the country. Her house was situated near a pond that housed more than a couple of frogs, and let's just say they were loud as hell. The user used to complain about all the noise when he was trying to sleep, so his grandma decided to tell him this story. Long before the grandma owned the house, it belonged to a very old couple. The man hated the frogs croaking all the time and wanted to get rid of them, but his wife told him they kept the Wendigo away. Brushing her off completely, he decided to go around the pond and catch all the frogs, and obviously it took some time, but he eventually did catch them all. That night, without the singing frogs, the man and his wife were brutally slaughtered and eaten by the Wendigo. Despite the user thinking it was just an old ghost story, he had never been more scared in his life than when he heard the frogs stop croaking himself. At number 8, we have Jack Fiddler. Back in 1907, OG Cree chief and medicine man Jack Fiddler was infamous for defeating Wendigos, and he was apparently really bloody good at it. Jack and his brother went after people who either had Wendigo psychosis or had transformed completely into Wendigos. The duo killed up to 14 people, and because Jack was known to have these great powers capable of stopping the spirit of Wendigos, that's how he got away with killing as many people as he did. However, in 1907, they were arrested for murder and homicide for the people they were trying to save. Jack ended up committing suicide prior to his sentence, and his brother Joseph died in prison days before finding out he was actually pardoned and was set free. You could have had it all, Joseph. You could have had it all. Could have had it all. Like number 7 slot is Pet Cemetery. Our Lord and Savior Stephen King has blessed us with some of the scariest stuff I've ever seen or read. His book Pet Cemetery actually has a Wendigo as the thing responsible for resurrecting all the animals and humans that were interred in the Micmac Cemetery. The family just stopped using the land because they think it's gone bad or sour, but really it's the Wendigo who's behind everything. It starts infecting the minds of the characters, and they start having visions of each other and wanting to kill each other, and some of them actually end up going through with it. The reanimated creatures are horribly changed. They're essentially just vessels for the Wendigos to put their spirits into and just to kill. I know this one is very fictional, but King did a lot of research into the mythical creature before writing the book, so a lot of the scary elements are factual, and that is scary as hell, even more so if you've seen the movie. Ugh, that was bad. In a good way, bad in a good way. Now, number 6 is the Texan Wendigo Part 1. Shared by Sehan Ricky from Yorktown, Texas, he said this took place on the 12th of January last year. The boy was bored as hell and had walked around his entire town that night and decided to finally go home. The route to get home had a large wooded area near it, and despite no one in town really exploring it, the boy thought it'd be a great idea to go through it that night. As he's coming up to the edge of the woods, he sees this massive 8 to 10 foot very pale figure walking away from the woods and going towards one of the houses. He decides at this point to avoid that situation altogether and goes straight into the woods, but he was just overwhelmed with this feeling of dread and this feeling of being watched. Can you imagine how scared this guy probably was? It's like 1 a.m. He's in the woods. He just saw this enormous figure. I don't even know why he went into the woods to begin with, the idiot. That's like when someone in a horror movie makes a decision that you know is gonna kill them, and you're just like, come on, why? You know better. You were raised better than that. Coming in at number 5 is the Texan Wendigo Part 2, and yes, it does not end there. Either way, the feeling of being watched gets worse and worse, and now he's at the point where he's looking behind him every 3 seconds, checking to make sure it's not there. Now, the 5th time he does this, he sees it. This time, the Wendigo is on all fours, still standing at about 5 feet tall. It had the whitest skin, almost like it had been bleached. The face was human-looking, the eyes were deep pits of black, and its arms were Slender Man level long. Like, this is precisely the sight you never want to see in daylight, let alone when you're walking alone in the woods at night. The Wendigo started swaying back and forth like it was debating how it was going to pounce on the boy. He wasted no time running the hell out of those woods and eventually getting home, making sure he did not look back even once. God knows what he would have seen. I would have shit myself just thinking about the situation. I would have shit myself before I even entered the woods. I would not enter the woods. At No. 4 are the Wendigo Woods Part 1. This was from traveling storyteller who shared that one summer her parents bought a new vacation home and they went to live in it for a few months. The log house was near the coast of the Atlantic Ocean and right on the US-Canadian border. Either way, when they arrived, the girl called out to her dad who was inside and asked if he could help her bring her suitcase in, and he obviously said yes. I love when dads are there just to do stuff like that. Go you dads. Either way, the dad came out the front door and all of a sudden he froze. He was looking at something behind the user and his eyes looked paralyzed with fear as his skin got paler and paler. And mind you, her dad was not a small guy by any means. He was huge himself, but somehow scared of whatever he was looking at. Within seconds, he snapped out of it and brought the suitcase inside like nothing had even happened. At dinner, the girl asked her dad what he was looking at earlier, and both parents looked like she just asked the most ridiculous question ever. Then all of a sudden, some form hit the window, shattering it, and when she looked towards the window, she saw this horrific, tall, human-like figure running away. Dun dun dun. Filling in the free slot are the Wendigo Woods Part 2. I mean, after all that went down, there was 100% definitely going to be an elephant in the rooms, and so now the user was like, what the hell was that? Because her parents didn't even look phased, they didn't even bat an eye, their blood pressure did not even raise. Mine is raised just telling the story. Now eventually the parents broke and asked her if she had ever heard of the legend of the Wendigo. They explained it to her, telling her that the location of their log house was the epicenter of all Wendigo sightings that had ever happened. The couple believed that the area was the center of the lore and they wanted to capture one if possible and examine and study it. The girl did not sleep a wink for the next 2 months and surprisingly encountered numerous Wendigo sightings. What I don't get is why the Wendigos didn't just possess or kill or eat this family. Why are they just letting them be? Now at number 2 is the thumb. This one was shared by the user Kodas Gaming, who lives in Killeen, Texas. Now the user was about 11 or 12 at the time of the story, and he was walking home from his friend's house around sunset. For some reason that night the streets were a lot emptier than usual. It was quiet and there was no one around. After passing 5 houses, the boy suddenly felt the shiver go down his spine. Something was watching him and he could feel it, and as soon as he turned around, his worst fears were confirmed. The thing was as grey as molten clay and about 7 to 8 feet tall. Its arms were extremely skinny and long like twigs, and his eyes and mouth were deep black sockets. It also had some kind of black rag around its neck which had no purpose whatsoever, it just made it even creepier. Now as soon as the guy saw the Wendigo, he ran home and he could fully hear the thumps of the creature following him. Now as soon as the boy finally got inside, slammed the door and locked it, he said he felt a thump along the door and it felt like a dead corpse just falling against the door. He then rushed to the window to see if it was still there, and all he saw was the Wendigo vanish into thin air. Remind me never to go to Texas, because that's not happening. And finally, at number 1 is Through the Binoculars. This one was shared by Artestesia from Wyoming. Back in September of 2016, she drove up to the Bighorn Mountains in Buffalo, and obviously she packed accordingly. She went up there about 4 times a week, so this wasn't a big deal by any means, and she wasn't scared, because why would she be? It's just a routine trip. That day, however, she went to a different location in the mountains called Hettinger, as opposed to the place she usually camped at. As she was taking in the view and looking over a hill, she saw an extremely tall figure emerging from the snow. I love how it's just like her handy dandy binoculars, and looked out of it to see the humanoid pale looking monster staring back at her through the lens. She looked away from the binoculars to see the monster coming right for her with its dagger-like nails, long limbs, and extremely deep set mouth eyes. She decided to hide in whatever hole she could find, even covering her mouth so the Wendigo couldn't hear her breathe. I mean, he couldn't hear you, he could probably sense your heartbeat. They probably have those kind of powers. Either way, she then closed her eyes because she couldn't even bear to look, and when she finally opened them again, she saw the Wendigo looking right through the hole, knowing something was there, but not knowing what. Eventually left the area, and the girl literally herself, as I would as well. I would literally just give myself up as an offering. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to survive again, so you just kill me now. Starting us off with number 10 is The Thing. This one comes from Reddit user Tio2025, who's part of the Algonquin tribe from his dad's side. The user and his friends went on a camping trip to New Jersey and camped near a super old cabin in the woods. They were doing typical camping stuff like listening to music, smoking, playing games, etc. And by 1 a.m. everyone was getting ready to go to bed. 2 hours later, the user woke up because of noises coming from outside. He looked outside the window to see this tall figure with glowing blue eyes just staring right at him. Now obviously at this point anyone would their pants, and so did the user. He quickly woke up his Native American friend Jack, who knew straight away that it was a Wendigo. He told everyone to get down as the thing came inside and started pacing and growling. After 10 tense minutes of this, it finally opened the cabin door and disappeared back into the night. After that, the boys could not sleep a wink because all they could hear were the screams of smaller animals coming from the woods. In the morning, they found a giant deer carcass outside the cabin, which meant they were this close to having the same fate as that deer the night before. Coming in at number 9 is Kira. Now this one was shared by Redditor Bedhead126, whose real name is Kira, and this story happened while she was on a trip to Austin. Late one night, her and her family were seeing some friends when Kira decided to walk past her backyard and into the forests behind it. Now everyone had gone inside to eat at this point, so she was there alone, and she just sat in the woods alone just thinking, because Kira likes that Whatever, I'm not gonna judge you, Kira, but being in the woods alone is usually how people die, mate. Have you never seen a horror movie? Have you never seen a top 10 video? Either way, after a while, the noises of the woods went silent and something seemed off. She had a log break behind her and she still wasn't really scared. Then she heard a screaming in the distance and it sounded like her little sister, but it just couldn't have been since she was inside the house. Finally, she was like, maybe it's not safe and I should go back home. So she started walking back while continuously looking over her shoulder. And then she saw it. This massive, deformed, deer-looking creature a mere 5 feet away from her, just drooling. She started running at the speed of light, and the noises that came out from the creature's mouth were just indescribable. She said they were horrifying, inhuman, and Kira claimed she felt them in her bones. She continued to hear the noises all throughout the night, even when she was back home. At number 8, we have The Hunt. So this one was shared by Reddit user Lick My Taint, and it takes place when he was 16 years old and on a fishing trip with 4 friends in Hamlin, New York. Now, the fishing area was 1.5 miles away from the nearest house, and the day was going pretty well. Everyone was having a good time, just chilling and smoking, and then it hits 9:30 p.m. To preface this, one of the friends, Brian, is part of the Navajo tribe, so he's our knowledgeable one in this scenario. Either way, out of nowhere, the friends start hearing dogs barking in the distance, almost like a pack of coyotes. Freaked out, the boys decide to walk home while semi-drunk. Don't know how that seemed like a good idea, but alright lads. Either way, a quarter of the way back, Brian stops walking and just becomes white with fear. The user asked him what was wrong, and Brian grabbed him by the wrist and turned him towards the fields. In it, they saw these menacing pair of eyes the size of footballs looking back at them. The two decided to keep it quiet so the others wouldn't freak out, but halfway home, the pack of dogs seemed to be following them, and something in the cornfield near them was also tailing them as the cops were going down like something was in them. They finally got back to Brian's house and got a gun, because that's America, and they sat on the porch. The boys thoroughly believed that they were being hunted by Wendigo, and that's why they grabbed the gun. But I mean, this is America, so I mean, people just grab guns for no reason, right? Following on number 7 slot is the camera footage. Back in November of 2013, YouTube channel Shimmy Jim Hog uploaded a video titled The Most Disturbing Video You Will Ever See. It starts off with some text about how at around 1:30 a.m. at night, they began to hear noises on their roof, and that continued for a few days. The video then starts and you can see the person filming his house in the dark, and as he goes outside around 1 minute into the video, the camera pans upwards towards the roof and you see this creature. This humanoid looking creature with shining eyes that quickly disappears when it realized it's been seen. It wasn't making any noise whatsoever, but it had a large bald head and its eyes looked like shining beacons of death, no cap. My guesses are it was either a Wendigo or a Wendigo possessed human, and neither of which I have time for personally. Now at number 6 are the Roseau sightings. Between the late 1800s and 1920s, locals of a small town called Roseau in Minnesota reported sightings of the Wendigo. Now every time anyone in town saw it, someone would unexpectedly die soon after. Now not much is known about the sightings or why they occurred, but they eventually stopped, as did the deaths, and everything just kind of went back to normal. That one was short and sweet, but honestly I couldn't find more information about it, you guys. Coming in at number 5 is You, shared by Hellfire Narrations on Reddit. The user said she went on her usual daily midnight stroll to the forest by her house. First of all, who's taking their daily midnight stroll to the forests? Nobody. Either way, soon after she got there, the warm air around her suddenly turned cold and she felt like she was being watched. Despite turning around and yelling hello, she saw and heard nothing out of the ordinary. Feeling a bit stupid and paranoid, she brushed it off and went further into the woods. When she looked back the next time, she saw these white, creepy eyes looking at her from behind some shrubbery. The creature was insanely tall and skinny. It had razor-sharp teeth and pointed, shiny fingernails. She knew it was a Wendigo straight away and ran the hell away as fast as she possibly could. The user had lost the creature a while back, but she was sobbing like crazy. When she looked into the creature's eyes, this creepy voice in her head said this: "A long time ago, I was created to haunt you, to fear you and lead you into dark corners. These times are over now since you can't escape. I am you, but changed to a horrifying monster." She was the Wendigo. The Wendigo was her. She screamed at the realization, but her voice went from being shrill and human to being monstrous. At number 4 are the marks. Shared by Reddit user WubbyBubby247, one night the user and his friend decided to go biking down this dirt road that was in desperate need of major maintenance. I'm talking potholes, little fires, deep holes, and so on. When they got to the tiny fire pit, they lit it as per usual, but they had a faint noise in the background, kind of like a disaster siren. Now the noise was getting louder and louder and sounded like it was coming towards the boys, but the direction of the sound was also the only way back home. The boys started running in the woods that lined the dirt road, and as soon as they turned the corner, they saw it. A gigantic, towering figure in the darkness just staring at them. They obviously ran the other way and finally got home not thinking much of anything. But when the boy woke up the next morning, he was freezing and had 3 long claw marks across his chest that were bleeding. His friend had woken up with the same thing. They decided to go back to the woods here and there to investigate, I don't know why, and each time they'd hear the siren and be chased out by this tall figure that was way too fast and ugly to be human. Filling on 3 Sword are the Nightmares Part 1. This one comes from Reddit user GameWriter420, who said she had a very weird nightmare about the Wendigo when she was a kid. And mind you, she didn't even know what a Wendigo was at that age or what they even looked like. Either way, in it she was in the woods and she saw this giant creature with a deer skull for a head staring at her. Nothing happened, it was just a lot of staring back and forth and a lot of cold air. Now a few years later she had the second dream, and again she was in some foggy forest and the Wendigo was just plain staring at her. But in the third dream, the figure actually walked towards her in this forest. Its sockets were so deep and black and was breathing very weirdly and heavily. Its back was so arched that its spinal bones were sticking out, and its arms were lanky and bony with claws at the end that looked like branches. Now she just didn't understand why she kept seeing the Wendigo when there was no connection there. After some research, she found out that sightings in your dreams could mean that the creature was possessing you. Now she admitted she did become more violent over the course of a few years, but that was due to mental health, not because she was possessed by a cannibalistic spirit. Now number 2 are the Nightmares Part 2. Now this one has nothing to do with the nightmares mentioned in number 3, but it is about another nightmare, so I just decided to title them Part 1 and 2, you know, for ease. So this one, however, was shared by Reddit user Dude, who said he had a horrifying dream about a Wendigo. In it, he went back in time to see how his city looked back in the day, and it was honestly just a few houses and a massive field. I swear if I had the option to go back in time, I wouldn't be like, oh, I wonder what Dubai looked like way back when. There's historical pictures for a reason, buddy. Either way, someone warned him not to go to the woods for fear of the Wendigo, but he ignored the warning. The woods were covered in a heavy fog, which made it hard to navigate through, and the user started feeling anxious. He was about to turn back when he saw a gigantic figure right in front of him. It had antlers and was as tall as a 2-apartment house, which is no bloody joke. One minute it was there, and the next it was gone. Then he started seeing figures appear all around him, but he knew that Wendigos could make you hallucinate. Now he woke up sweating and fearful, but he couldn't stop seeing visions of distorted images in his head of people eating a lion or a zebra. He started losing control of his own sight, kind of like he was getting possessed by the Wendigo. And that's all he wrote, so I don't even know if he got fully possessed. And finally, at number 1 is The Canyon, shared by Reddit user Srosty. This story took place on March 27th of last year. Now the user was riding his bike in his neighborhood, and there's this huge canyon that's about 400 feet from his house, so obviously he made his way there. On his way up the hill, he got a whiff of something absolutely disgusting. Despite nearly vomiting, he finally made it to the top of the hill. When he turned around, he literally started crying straight away. In front of him was a 12 to 15 foot tall Wendigo that had a wolf's head and was missing skin around its spinal cord. The boy could see through its ribcage and its legs were literally bent backwards like something out of The Exorcist. Now the Wendigo turned to face him, and it was at that moment the boy took off, narrowly escaping with his life. He claims he still cries every time he thinks about the encounter and hasn't gone biking since. Honestly, I'd be pretty scarred as well, so I wouldn't be trying to go there either, to be honest.
Click right here, yeah, right on this massive jaw, to uncover the ultimate apex predator. The megalodon, a 60-foot super shark that dominated the seas. But here's the twist, some say it never went extinct. Could this prehistoric beast still be alive, hunting in our oceans? Find out now, if you're not afraid to dive in.